Dr. Jake Harrison walked into the bright white room on Aurora Prime Space Station, pushing up his shirt sleeve like he had done so many times before. After 5 years of working with aliens in deep space, these medical checks had become routine. Jake was a tall guy with messy brown hair who spent his days studying alien creatures and how they lived. The alien doctor looked nothing like a human. It had 4 long arms that moved like a spider, and its skin was a pale blue color that seemed to glow under the station lights. Jake had worked with Valkorians before and knew they were some of the best medical technicians in the galaxy. Their steady hands and sharp eyes made them perfect for detailed work. Just another day at the office, Jake thought as the needle went into his arm. The blood sample disappeared into a machine that looked like a metal box covered in blinking lights. These quantum genetic analyzers could break down DNA faster than anything humans had ever built. Usually, the results came back in minutes with a simple readout showing human genetics with maybe some minor variations. But something was wrong this time. The machine that normally hummed quietly started making sharp beeping sounds. Jake watched the alien's 4 eyes widen as it stared at the screen. The translator device on its collar clicked and word before speaking in perfect English. "This cannot be correct," the Valkorian said, tapping the screen with one of its thin fingers. "Your genetic signature does not match any known intelligent species in our database." Jake felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean? I'm human. My family has lived on Earth for hundreds of years. My great-grandfather was born in Ohio, for crying out loud." The alien ran the test again, its movements now quick and nervous. "Yes, you are human, but your DNA contains genetic sequences we have never seen before. In 3,000 years of studying intelligent life across the galaxy, every species has clear genetic markers that tell us where they came from and how they evolved. But you appear to be from a completely unknown evolutionary path." Jake's mind raced. He knew that all intelligent species had what scientists call genetic fingerprints. These were special patterns in DNA that showed how a species had developed over millions of years. The Zephyrians had markers that showed they evolved on high-gravity worlds. The crystalline beings had sequences that proved they developed in mineral-rich environments. Every species had a story written in their genes. "Run it again," Jake said, though he could hear the worry in his own voice. The machine beeped 3 more times with the same result. The Valkorian's translator crackled as it spoke more quickly now. "Dr. Harrison, I must report this to the station commander immediately. In my 40 years of genetic analysis, I have never seen results like this." Within 2 hours, Jake found himself sitting in conference room 7 facing 3 officials from the Galactic Council's Department of Xenological Studies. They were the people who decided which species got to join galactic civilization and which ones were considered too dangerous or primitive. Jake had always been on the other side of these meetings, presenting his research on newly discovered alien life forms. The lead investigator was a tall, gray-skinned being called a monitor. They were known throughout the galaxy for their cold, scientific approach to everything. "Dr. Harrison," it said through its translator, "we need to understand what we are dealing with. Your genetic profile suggests you belong to a species that should not exist." "I don't understand what that means," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "It means," the monitor continued, "that according to our models of how intelligent life develops, your genetic structure is impossible. The sequences in your DNA do not follow any known evolutionary pattern. It is as if your species appeared from nowhere." Jake felt like the room was spinning. He had spent his whole career studying how life evolved on different worlds. He knew that evolution followed certain rules, and those rules were written in DNA like a history book. But now they were telling him that his own genetic history made no sense. "What happens now?" he asked. The monitor's expression never changed. "Now, Dr. Harrison, you become our most important research subject. We need to understand where humans really came from, because our current understanding of your species may be completely wrong." As Jake left the meeting room, he realized his life had just changed forever. For the first time in his career of studying alien mysteries, he had become the mystery that needed solving. Dr. Lisa Morgan hadn't slept properly in 3 days. Her red hair was twisted up in a messy knot, held in place by what looked like a spare data cable she had grabbed from the lab bench. Coffee cups and energy drink containers covered every surface of the main laboratory on Aurora Prime Station. She was the Council's best genetic archaeologist, someone who could read the history of entire species by looking at their DNA patterns. "Jake, look at this," she said, rubbing her tired eyes as another test result appeared on the massive holographic display that filled the center of the room. The display showed millions of colorful genetic patterns spinning like a giant DNA helix made of light. "We've compared your genetic code to every single intelligent species we know about. Living ones, dead ones, even the ones that went extinct millions of years ago. Jake pulled up a chair next to her workstation, watching the endless parade of alien genetic patterns scroll past. Each one told the story of how that species had evolved over millions of years. The patterns looked like complex musical notes, with each sequence creating a unique song of evolutionary history. And nothing matches. Jake asked, though he already knew the answer from Lisa's exhausted expression. It's worse than that, Lisa said, pointing to a section of his genetic code highlighted in bright red on the screen. These sequences in your DNA don't just fail to match anything we know. They're completely different from how we understand intelligent life develops. It's like finding a car engine in a horse. She pulled up another display showing the normal patterns they expected to see in evolved species. Look, every intelligent species follows certain rules when they develop. They start simple, get more complex over time, and leave genetic markers showing each step. But your DNA has sections that look like they were designed by someone who had never heard of those rules. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What about other humans? Maybe it's just me, some kind of genetic mutation or something. Lisa's expression grew even more serious. That's where things get really weird. We quietly collected genetic samples from humans living on 12 different colony worlds. We told them it was for routine health screening, nothing more. She brought up a new display showing human genetic profiles from across the galaxy. Some glowed green for normal, while others pulsed with the same red warning color as Jake's. About 30% of humans show these same impossible genetic sequences. The other 70% look completely normal, exactly what would expect from a species that evolved naturally on Earth. It's like there are two different types of humans, and nobody ever noticed before. Jake stared at the data, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. How is that possible? How could some humans have completely different evolutionary backgrounds? I don't know, Lisa admitted. But I've been thinking about this backwards. Instead of looking at current species, maybe we need to look at really old stuff. Ancient fossils, extinct creatures, things that died out long before current galactic civilization began. That's when Keeper Thane entered the laboratory. The ancient crystalline being moved slowly, its body looking like it was made of living glass that reflected rainbow colors in the light. Thane was old even by crystalline standards, having spent over 800 years maintaining the galaxy's oldest archives. Its voice sounded like wind chimes when it spoke. Young researchers, Thane said, its words translated into musical tones that somehow Jake understood perfectly. I have been listening to your puzzle. Perhaps you search in the wrong time period. Lisa looked up hopefully. What do you mean? The deep archives contain fossil records from worlds that died before your current civilizations existed. Worlds that were marked as dead long ago, their names forgotten. If these genetic sequences are truly ancient, perhaps we should look in truly ancient places. Thane approached the main computer terminal, moving with surprising speed for such an old being. Its crystalline fingers touched the control panel, and suddenly the display changed completely. Instead of showing modern genetic patterns, it began showing fossil records that were incredibly old. These are genetic sequences extracted from fossils found on dead worlds, Thane explained. Most are incomplete, damaged by time, but some still hold traces of the original DNA. The computer searched through millions of ancient fossil records, looking for any match to Jake's impossible genetic sequences. Hours passed with no results. Jake was starting to think they were wasting their time when suddenly the entire display turned bright green. Match found, the computer announced in its calm artificial voice. On the screen appeared the genetic sequence of a creature that had been dead for 65 million years. The fossil had been found on a planet that the ancient archives called Terra, what humans now knew as Earth. But this wasn't the fossil of any normal creature. The genetic reconstruction showed something massive, powerful, and undeniably intelligent. According to the ancient records, the civilization that had once lived on Terra had called these beings by a name that made Jake's blood run cold. Dragons. This can't be right, Jake whispered, staring at the display showing his own genetic sequences perfectly matching those of a creature from mythology. Dragons aren't real. They're just stories. Lisa was frantically pulling up more data. According to these records, dragons weren't just real, they were the dominant intelligent species on Earth before some kind of massive extinction event wiped them out. And somehow, Jake, you're carrying their genetic legacy. The laboratory fell silent as the three of them stared at the evidence on the screen. Jake wasn't just human, he was the descendant of dragons. The news hit the galactic communication networks like a bomb going off. Within hours of the dragon discovery, every major news outlet across thousands of worlds was running the same shocking headline: humans are descendants of ancient dragons. Jake watched in horror as his face appeared on news screens throughout the galaxy, labeled as Patient Zero of humanity's true heritage. His personal communicator buzzed constantly with interview requests, scientific inquiries, and messages from humans across the galaxy who had just learned they might be carrying dragon DNA. Jake had gone from being an unknown scientist to the most famous person in galactic civilization overnight, and he hated every second of it. "Turn it off," Jake said to Lisa as they watched another news report in the station's common area. The alien reporter was explaining to viewers how dragons had once been the most feared creatures in the galaxy, capable of destroying entire fleets with their bare claws. "We can't hide from this," Lisa replied, but she switched off the display anyway. Every government in the galaxy is demanding answers. Some are calling for immediate restrictions on human travel. Others want to study every human they can find. That's when Commander Beth Torres arrived on Aurora Prime. Jake felt relief wash over him when he saw his old friend stepping off the transport ship. Beth was a career military officer who had spent 15 years working with alien governments and militaries. She was tough, smart, and one of the few people Jake trusted completely. Beth had short black hair and the kind of confident walk that made people step aside in corridors. She wore her blue military uniform with pride, and her face showed the serious expression of someone who had seen real combat. But when she looked at the ancient dragon records, even Beth seemed shaken. "Jake, do you understand what these archives are saying?" she asked, pointing to the holographic display showing dragon capabilities. According to these records, dragons weren't just big lizards. They were apex predators with intelligence that made other species look like children. The display showed reconstructed images of dragons that were nothing like the fairy tale creatures humans remembered. These dragons were massive, with bodies that could stretch over 100 feet long. Their scales weren't just armor, they could apparently generate and control energy fields. Most terrifying of all, the records showed they could survive in the vacuum of space without any protection. "Look at this," Beth continued, reading from the ancient text. "Dragons could manipulate electromagnetic fields, communicate across vast distances without technology, and some records suggest they lived for thousands of years. They didn't just rule Earth, they terrorized half the galaxy." Jake stared at the holographic reconstruction of a dragon's head. The creature's eyes showed unmistakable intelligence, but also something predatory that made his skin crawl. "And you're saying I'm related to that thing?" "The genetic evidence doesn't lie," Lisa said quietly. "The DNA matches perfect. These dragons were your ancestors." Beth pulled up another section of the archives that made Jake's stomach turn. "Here's the really scary part. According to these records, dragons didn't die from old age or disease. They were killed in what the archives call the Great Purge. Other species in the galaxy united to wipe them out because they were considered an existential threat to all other life." "What kind of threat?" Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "The records say dragons saw other intelligent species as either food or obstacles," Beth explained. "They conquered worlds not to colonize them, but to hunt the inhabitants for sport. When they got bored with a planet, they would destroy it completely and move on to the next one." Lisa brought up star charts showing Earth's location in the galaxy. "This explains why Earth was marked as a dead world in all the old navigation systems. After the dragons were supposedly wiped out, other species assumed nothing could have survived whatever catastrophe destroyed them. They never bothered to check if any life had recovered." "But obviously something did survive," Jake said, the implications hitting him like a physical blow. "Humans survived. We evolved from whatever was left after the dragons died." Outside Aurora Prime Station, the political situation was rapidly getting worse. Beth showed them reports from across the galaxy of alien governments calling emergency sessions. Some species were demanding immediate restrictions on human movement between worlds. Others wanted to quarantine all human colonies until scientists could figure out which humans carried dragon genetics. "The Hegemony Council is mobilizing 3 battle fleets," Beth said grimly. "Officially, they're calling it a protective escort mission for human colonies. Unofficially, they're scared out of their minds that humans might somehow awaken dormant dragon abilities." Jake felt sick. "This is insane. I'm a scientist, not some kind of monster. I've spent my whole career helping other species understand each other better." "I know that, and you know that," Beth replied. "But out there, billions of beings are learning that the species they thought were harmless explorers and scientists are actually the descendants of the galaxy's most feared predators. Some alien governments are calling humans a sleeper threat that could activate at any time. The communication system in the lab suddenly activated, showing an incoming priority message from Earth's government. The face of President Rodriguez appeared on the screen, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Dr. Harrison," the president said, "I need you to understand that every human colony in the galaxy is now under some form of surveillance or restriction. 3 governments have already expelled human diplomats. The situation is rapidly becoming a crisis that could lead to war." Jake looked around the lab at his friends and colleagues who were now staring at him like he was a dangerous animal that might bite at any moment. The galaxy had spent centuries learning to trust humans, building relationships and friendships across species lines. In one day, all of that trust had been shattered by the revelation of humanity's true heritage. "What do we do now?" Jake asked quietly. Beth's expression was grim as she looked at the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. "Now we pray that whatever's dormant in human genetics stays dormant. Because if humans start manifesting dragon abilities, this crisis could become a war that destroys galactic civilization." Outside the station's windows, Jake could see alien warships taking positions around Aurora Prime. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again, and Jake wasn't sure that was going to be survivable for anyone. The trouble started when 3 hegemony officials in dark uniforms marched into Jake's laboratory without warning. They weren't there to ask questions or request cooperation. They had come to take him away, whether he wanted to go or not. "Dr. Harrison," the lead official announced in a cold voice, "you will accompany us to Facility 7 for comprehensive genetic analysis and containment protocols." Jake felt his heart racing. Facility 7 was notorious throughout the galaxy as a place where dangerous specimens went in but never came out. "I'm not going anywhere with you," he said, backing away from the officials. "I haven't done anything wrong." That's when Security Chief Tom Bradley stepped between Jake and the hegemony officers. Tom was a big, solid man who had spent 20 years protecting the scientists on Aurora Prime Station. His hand moved toward the weapon on his belt as he faced the intruders. "This is a research station under Galactic Council protection," Tom said firmly. "You have no authority here." The lead hegemony official smiled coldly and pulled out what looked like a small metal rod. "Our authority comes from the Emergency Species Threat Protocol. Stand aside or be considered an accomplice to harboring a potential danger." That's when Jake felt it happen. Something deep inside his chest began to burn, like someone had lit a fire in his ribcage. The sensation spread outward through his arms and legs, making his skin feel like it was glowing from the inside. His heart wasn't just racing anymore, it was pounding like a drum, faster and stronger than any human heart should be able to beat. "What's happening to me?" Jake gasped, looking down at his hands. His skin was actually starting to glow with a faint golden light, and the air around him was getting warmer by the second. The temperature readings on the wall displays started climbing rapidly. Jake's body heat was rising to levels that should have killed him instantly, but instead he felt more alive than ever before. His vision became incredibly sharp, allowing him to see details he had never noticed before. He could hear conversations happening 3 rooms away as clearly as if people were whispering in his ear. But the strangest thing was that he could suddenly sense every piece of electronic equipment around him. The computers, the lights, the communication systems, he could feel their electromagnetic fields like invisible threads connecting him to every machine on the station. "Stay back!" Jake shouted as he realized what was happening. The burning sensation in his chest was growing stronger, and he could feel energy building up inside him like pressure in a boiling kettle. The hegemony officials raised their energy weapons, but the moment they tried to fire, sparks exploded from the barrels. The weapons made horrible grinding noises before going completely dead. At the same time, every computer screen in the laboratory flickered and went black. Emergency lights started flashing as the station's main power grid fluctuated wildly. "Impossible," one of the officials whispered, staring at his useless weapon. "No biological creature can generate electromagnetic pulses that powerful." Tom looked at Jake with amazement and fear. "Jake, your skin is glowing, and the temperature in here just jumped 20 degrees. What's happening to you?" Jake didn't have an answer, but he didn't need one. Across the galaxy, other humans were experiencing the same impossible transformation. On Titan Station, a mining engineer named Rebecca Stone was working in the deep tunnels when a catastrophic pressure failure should have killed her instantly. The tunnel filled with poisonous gas and lost all its atmosphere, creating conditions that no human could survive without protective gear. But Rebecca didn't die. Instead, she found herself breathing normally in a vacuum, her body somehow adapting to the deadly environment as if space itself couldn't hurt her. Meanwhile, on a transport ship heading to the Outer Rim, pilot Mark Rivers was struggling with a navigation computer that had crashed during a solar storm. In desperation, he placed his hands directly on the control panel, hoping to manually reset the system. Instead, his consciousness seemed to merge with the ship's computer. He could feel the navigation data flowing through his mind like his own thoughts, allowing him to pilot the ship with a precision that should have been impossible for any biological being. Across the galaxy on a terraforming world, atmospheric engineer David Kim was trying to fix a massive processor that controlled the planet's weather systems. When he touched the main control unit, blue electricity began flowing from his fingertips directly into the machine. The processor not only fixed itself but began operating at efficiency levels far beyond its original design specifications. These weren't isolated incidents. Reports were flooding in from every human colony in the galaxy. Humans who could survive in conditions that should kill them. Humans who could interface with technology using nothing but their touch. Humans whose physical capabilities were suddenly far beyond what anyone thought possible. When the Hegemony battle fleet arrived at the human colonies with the intention of forcibly relocating every human to containment facilities, they discovered that their targets had become something entirely different from the harmless scientists and colonists they expected to find. Human colonists were walking around in space without protective suits, repairing the outsides of their ships with their bare hands. Others were communicating with their colonies' computer systems through direct physical contact, managing complex operations that normally required teams of trained technicians. The Hegemony admiral in charge of the operation watched in shock as human engineers literally reached into his ship's external sensors and disabled them by touch alone. His weapons systems mysteriously malfunctioned every time his crew tried to target human settlements. Even his communication equipment stopped working properly whenever he got too close to human colonies. "Sir," his tactical officer reported in a shaky voice, "our weapons aren't functioning. Every time we try to lock onto a human settlement, our targeting systems go offline. It's like they're generating some kind of interference field that our technology can't penetrate." The admiral stared at the viewscreen showing humans floating freely in space around their colonies, working on construction projects that should have required massive mechanical equipment. These weren't the same species that had been asking permission to explore the galaxy just a few days ago. These were something far more powerful, and far more dangerous. The attempted subjugation of humanity failed before it even truly began, not through violence or warfare, but because the humans had suddenly become beings that the galaxy's most advanced technology simply couldn't contain or control. The dragons had awakened, and they were no longer the primitive creatures that other species remembered from ancient history. 2 years had passed since the awakening began, and Jake could hardly believe how much the galaxy had changed. He stood in the observation deck of the Dragon Heritage Institute, a massive space station that now orbited Earth like a shining beacon visible from the planet's surface. Through the reinforced windows, he watched dozens of awakened humans practicing their abilities in specially designed training chambers. In one chamber, a woman named Rachel was learning to control her bioelectric fields, sending gentle pulses of energy into a damaged computer system to repair it from the inside. In another, a man called Kevin was practicing surviving in vacuum, his body somehow processing trace elements from space itself to sustain his biological functions. The abilities varied from person to person, but they all shared the same impossible nature that defied everything science thought it knew about human biology. "It's incredible, isn't it?" Tom said, joining Jake at the observation window. The former security chief looked completely different now. Gone was his standard station uniform, replaced by the distinctive blue and silver outfit of an institute trainer. His face showed a confidence that hadn't been there 2 years ago, when he was just trying to protect scientists from bureaucrats. Tom had become awakened himself about 6 months after Jake's first transformation. His abilities focused on what they called technological empathy. He could sense the condition and needs of any mechanical system just by being near it. This made him perfect for training other awakened humans how to interface safely with the galaxy's various technologies without accidentally destroying them. "Sometimes I look at what we can do now and it scares me," Jake admitted. "Yesterday I watched Patricia fix a fusion reactor by literally reaching into it with her bare hands. If we wanted to, we could probably take over most of the galaxy's infrastructure in a matter of weeks." Tom nodded seriously. "That's exactly the conversation I had with the new arrivals this morning. Some of them come here angry about how aliens treated us during the crisis. They want revenge, or at least to show everyone how powerful we've become." "And what do you tell them?" "The same thing you told me when I first awakened," Tom replied. "That power without wisdom is exactly what made the original dragons into monsters. We're not going to repeat their mistakes." the Dragon Heritage Institute had become more than just a training facility. It was a symbol of humanity's choice to use their incredible new abilities responsibly. Instead of conquering or intimidating other species, awakened humans had become the galaxy's most trusted mediators and problem solvers. When conflicts arose between species, they called on human negotiators who could literally feel the electromagnetic emotions of different alien races and help them understand each other. When natural disasters struck distant worlds, awakened humans were the first responders, able to survive in conditions that would kill anyone else and interface directly with damaged planetary systems to coordinate rescue efforts. The same abilities that could have been used for destruction were instead being used to heal and protect. Lisa approached them carrying her ever-present data tablet, though she looked much more relaxed than she had during those frantic early days of discovery. Her hair was still red, but now it was neatly styled instead of held up with spare cables. She had become the Institute's director of genetic research, helping newly awakened humans understand and control their emerging abilities. The latest statistics are fascinating, Lisa said, showing them her tablet. We've now identified the specific genetic triggers that activate Dragon Heritage. It turns out that about 40% of all humans carry the dormant sequences, but they only awaken under specific conditions of extreme stress or need. Jake looked at the data with amazement. So nearly half of humanity could potentially awaken. That's right, but here's the interesting part, Lisa continued. The awakening process seems to be naturally regulated. People don't just randomly start manifesting dragon abilities. It happens when they're needed most, during emergencies, when they're trying to help others, or when they're faced with problems that their normal human abilities can't solve. Tom laughed. So basically, the dragon genetics only activate when someone is trying to be a hero. It appears that way, Lisa said with a smile. It's like the genetic programming includes some kind of moral component. The abilities emerge to help and protect, not to dominate or destroy. This discovery had been crucial in convincing the galaxy that awakened humans weren't a threat. The Galactic Council had completely restructured itself, with humanity taking on new roles as mediators, protectors, and problem solvers. Where their ancient dragon ancestors had inspired fear and hatred, modern awakened humans inspired cooperation and hope. Jake thought about his own journey from a simple xenobiologist to someone who could interface with quantum genetic analyzers using nothing but his touch, helping to unlock the mysteries of life throughout the galaxy. He had used his abilities to help dozens of species better understand their own evolutionary history and develop new medical treatments for genetic diseases. You know what the best part is? Jake said, looking out at Earth turning slowly in space below them. The galaxy spent millions of years thinking Earth was a dead world, completely written off and forgotten. Now it's become the most important planet in galactic civilization, not because we're conquering anyone, but because we're helping everyone. Through the windows, they could see transport ships from dozens of different species arriving at Earth's orbital stations. Alien scientists came to study at human universities. Diplomatic missions sought human mediators for complex negotiations. Young aliens from across the galaxy applied to study at the Dragon Heritage Institute, learning alongside awakened humans about responsibility, cooperation, and using power wisely. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. The dragons had returned to the galaxy, but this time they came not as the destroyers of legend, but as guardians of the peace their ancestors' reputation had nearly shattered. The awakened humans had taken the incredible power of their dragon heritage and chosen to use it not for conquest, but for protection. Jake smiled as he watched a group of mixed species, humans, Valkorians, crystallines, and others, working together on a project to restore atmosphere to a dead world. The dragons were back, but they had brought with them something their ancestors had never possessed: human wisdom, empathy, and the understanding that true strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. The galaxy would never be the same, and for the first time since this all began, Jake was absolutely certain that was a good thing.